Good evening, baseball fans, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. The AL and NL Division Series have come to an end, and boy, we had some great battles, some great challenges, no sweeps, so that's pretty entertaining, but we do finally have our championship series set. We're going to look at what happened in each league. We're going to start off with the American League, where the Blue Jays probably made about the easiest work of the Yankees that anybody expected them to in their series, and the Mariners and Tigers had just a knock-it-out, drag-it-out fight to the end. Now, of course, we have the Blue Jays facing off against the Mariners. That series has already started. We're going to take a look at where it is so far and what we expect the rest of the way as both teams battle it out for a spot in the World Series. Then we're going to jump over to the National League, where the Dodgers and Phillies, the Dodgers took care of business. It was a close series, like the individual games were close, but as a whole, the Dodgers were able to take it home without too much fuss. And the Brewers and Cubs, another knock-it-out, drag-it-out fight, as one would expect from these divisional foes. So now we have Brewers and Dodgers for the championship, where that one is currently underway, with game one underway right now. We're going to give that a preview, a proper preview, since we'll just pretend it hasn't really started, and then we'll be able to roll from there. And then we're going to look at the manager openings. Right now there are 8 openings in the MLB, and we're going to give you our thoughts on which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones are, well, probably just downright ugly. You've got Ricky K and Mike Patt here with you on the Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports. We hear a quick word from a sponsor. Get right to it.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. You've got Ricky K and Mike Patt here with you tonight, and we have a lot of very exciting baseball to get to, so let's get right to it. First of all, we do have Brian Francione in the chat room with us saying good evening. Good evening to you, Sue, sir. I hope you are enjoying playoff baseball like the rest of us whose teams are eliminated, still enjoying it nonetheless. So, Ricky, before we dive into it, I just wanted to get some general thoughts. The divisional series, all 4 have wrapped up, and we are on to the championship series. But in general, what were your thoughts on this divisional round?
Well, like you said, we didn't get any sweeps, which I thought was great for the sport, that you had 2 game 5s to at least have it extend into the week. I didn't think there were many. I guess there was like a surprise, with Toronto, but I don't even know if that was that much of a surprise. But I love the game 5, the Mariners Tigers. That was an instant classic, and we'll get into it and if there is anything to blame. But just the theater of that, and it's kind of weird because if your team's in it, it's like pins and needles on every pitch. I can't imagine being a Tigers or Mariners fan watching that game. I probably would have paced around my house 3, 4, 5 times as every inning it seemed like there were bases loaded. But as a casual fan, you're watching and hoping this game goes to 18, 19 innings. Probably one of the best playoff games of at least the last 25, 30 years for sure.
No, that was a great one. And man, Tigers came so close for my upset pick to coming to fruition. So close. They were right there. They almost had it, but nonetheless, a great series there for sure. Yeah, I thought these were all very entertaining series. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So first of all, probably what I would say was the least dramatic series from start to finish. The Blue Jays defeating the Yankees 3-1. The Blue Jays, I think we talked about this on our show last Monday. They got off to a roaring hot start in this series, beating the Yankees in the first two games in Toronto, 10-1 and then 13-7. The Yankees did give them a little bit of a challenge, made them sweat ever so slightly in game 3 there, taking that one 9-6. But then the Blue Jays were able to wrap it up in game 4, winning it 5-2, despite another pretty darn good performance from Cam Schlittler again, who I don't think you can talk enough about how the rookie performed in the playoffs for the Yankees. But Ricky, what were your thoughts on this series? You mentioned that you could possibly consider this a little bit of surprise given how the Yankees came in and the Blue Jays struggles all year with quality teams. But what were your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't think, Mike, this was that much of a surprise because the Blue Jays, outside of a couple of games here or there, have been very tough against the Yankees this year. And I think Toronto just exposed really what these two teams are. The Blue Jays are a team that puts the ball in play, which they did pretty much every game. They knocked Rodon out of game 3 early, give the Yankee bullpen credit for pitching 6 strong innings and just shutting down the Blue Jays after that. And Cam Schlittler, like you said, goes 6 1/3, and it probably wasn't even his best stuff. Toronto did a really good job in that game of fouling pitches off, making him work, which they've done the previous 2 times. To me, it comes down to the Yankees' offense. And Aaron Judge looked like was going to have his moment when he hit the home run off of Arland off the foul pole. He definitely needed one of those. And he's not to blame in this series because, I mean, he hits 500 in the series, but nobody else showed up. Giancarlo Stanton didn't show up. Trent Grisham didn't show up. Ben Rice didn't show up. Bellinger, outside of a home run in game 2, didn't really show up. Like Jazz did his thing a little bit, but I think Toronto just doesn't have a lot of holes in that lineup, and the Yankees have so many of them. And it makes you wonder going forward, because we'll talk about Toronto and how their flaws are kind of catching up to them in this series. But for the Yankees to lose a bullpen game, because you thought, okay, they won game 3, they're getting the bullpen in game 4, they should at least get this back to Toronto, and then you get freed in a game 5 and you see what happens. They couldn't hit any of the relievers, and they're trying to like go left, right, and all this stuff. It doesn't matter how you approach it if you don't hit. And to me, you look at the Yankees next year, I think they have to bring back Cody Bellinger. They've got the pieces in place, but they're not really going to, I think, add significantly because of the incoming CBA and the fact that I think you look at there's not really much. Maybe they trade from their starting pitching depth to get something. They found some things, which is great. But you keep wondering if they're just going to continue to waste the Aaron Judge window. And I think this was one where the Yankees had every opportunity, and for some reason their bats went cold at the wrong time. But the Blue Jays proved a better team because, hey, the Yankees kept pitching to Vlad. I don't know why, but Vlad had himself an insane series, and he enjoyed the Yankees lose to David Ortiz after the series.
Yeah, that was a great moment for sure. And I do want to give Judge his props here as well, because I think, the going, discussion about him is that he disappears in the playoffs. But, in this playoff, in the 7 games between Boston and Toronto, he hit 500 with a 1.273 OPS. So you got to give Judge, I think, his flowers here. Yeah, the Yankees just, the first 2 games, it was all about just they couldn't stop the bats of Toronto. Toronto came out on fire. They crushed it. I will say the last, the second half of game 2 and the game 3 kind of exposed some areas of concern with the Blue Jays, namely in the bullpen. I know they've got a lot of decent relievers, but do they have enough guys who can really shut it down late in games? I think that's going to be something to watch as we discuss the championship series first. But yeah, I mean, this was, aside from, like I said, a bullpen run where, and by the way, this was I think this was the closest of the 3 games here, or of the 4 series here, to a sweep, because Toronto was up 6-1 in game 3. And like you said, it took a heroic effort from New York's bullpen, and the bats were arriving late in that game, and of course the Aaron Judge home run to save them from the sweep. But the Yankees, they pretty much matched my expectations on the season. Winning 94 games. I believe we picked them pretty collectively, picked them to finish first in the division, and they virtually did. I know it was basically a tiebreaker to Toronto at the end there. That was the deciding factor. But aside from, a couple of hiccups and the injuries early on to the pitching, I know kind of set them back a little bit to start. But, the regular season met expectations. The playoff run, I mean, when you're the Yankees, are the expectations anything ever short of a World Series if you're the Yankees? I mean, let's be honest about it. But the Blue Jays, great series, and they move on to play this team that had an absolutely thrilling series against the Tigers. Despite Detroit winning that first game in Seattle and taking the early lead, the Mariners came back. They took game 2, took game 3 then in Detroit before the Tigers won 9-3 in game 4. And then, as you mentioned, the instant classic. The only thing that would have been better is if it was a game 7 versus a game 5 in a series, but in 15 innings going back and forth before Seattle, Jorge Polanco, who I'll talk about in a minute here, was able to finish it off. But I mean, was this the best of the 4 series? Let's just cut to the chase.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was the best of the 4 because you're looking at it where Seattle looked to be in control of that series after game 3. The Tigers were able to mount a comeback in game 4 against the middle of Seattle's bullpen. Javi Baez gets a big hit. Gleyber Torres had some big hits. Riley Green had a huge home run. They looked at the Tigers offense, kind of similar to Cleveland, where they struggled the first 2 games to get hits at men on base, and all of a sudden the flood opened and they started getting hits. And it started picking up that way. So for them to get a big game 4 win when Casey Mize only threw, 3 innings in game 4, which he had 6 strikeouts, and Hinch pulled the plug so early on that one. Game 5, like we talked about, was crazy. Fun facts about that: AJ Hinch did not use one player off his bench in 15 innings. That's amazing. In this day and age, that is amazing to have. I don't know what that means Hinch thinks of his roster, especially when he's using Jahmai Jones against lefties. It seemed all season long to not try to go to that spot or something like that. But they're going to get questioned for Tarek Skubal. And Tarek Skubal to have 13 strikeouts, no walks in 6 innings was absolutely outstanding. Gets Cal Raleigh to strike out in 101. And he comes out of the game on, was it 99 pitches? Mm-hmm. Now, I know he hadn't gone more than, I think, 107 on the year. And maybe that's on the Tigers for not pushing him earlier in the year to get maybe that 110, 115. Because you got to think Skubal emptied the tank to get Raleigh at that point. But you're up 2-1. You have a chance. And Seattle brings in Leo Rivas to pinch hit on his birthday in the 7th. And he gets the game-tying hit. You can't make that kind of stuff up. That's just incredible. The amount of the relievers, the starters that were relievers were great. When you think about Luis Castillo coming in, Logan Gilbert coming in. You had for Detroit, Jack Flaherty came in, got behind 3-1 on every batter, was in like the 13th, and he somehow found a way out of it. I don't know how against the heart of that lineup, but he did. And just give the Mariners credit. I mean, they found ways to win with different players. And just be able, their bullpen, I think, is a very solid group. It doesn't get talked about a lot. I mean, Bizzardo pitched in all 5 games. Munoz usually does his thing. Spires facing lefties all the time. They have that core group. Brash has been pretty good. They were able to find the right pieces. Their pitching kind of carried the day, where Detroit had used a lot of arms. And by the time you get to the 15th and Tommy Kahnle's throwing, and everybody knows the changeup's coming, that's kind of maybe the last guy I want to use. But the future's bright for Detroit. I mean, Hinch just got an extension. It sounds like they're trying to extend Skubal, who's going to be in the final year of his deal. What happens this winter? Do they trade him? I don't. You have to assurances, I think, before the season starts, he's going to sign there. But I think their farm system's good. They just need to fix the offense. If they can get more consistency in this offense, then Detroit doesn't blow a 15-game lead and maybe has home field in this series. And I think that's the similar thing to the Yankees and Tigers. If you play things differently in the regular season, you might have had home field in these series. And you clearly saw what T-Mobile can be and what it will be the next couple of games. It is electric in Seattle. And congrats to the Mariners' first ALCS appearance since 2001. And they earned every part of that series win.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, no, I've heard various rumblings about Scooball, and that's definitely going to be a hot topic for them. And I'm sure the more you hear about a trade, maybe the more you'll assume that maybe they don't have the assurance that they're going to be able to sign him. I mean, you got to think he gets a deal. Let's see, what was it? I mean, Corbin Burns got 6 years, 210 this past offseason. Max Fried got 8 years, 228. So you got to assume probably not obviously this offseason, but the following offseason, you're looking at least that. Does Detroit pony that up? But that'll be a conversation for the future, not for the now. I got to give a shout out. He hasn't did like putting up amazing numbers like in terms of averages, but man, how clutch was Jorge Polanco in this series and so far for, as we'll talk about for the Mariners so far in their next series, in an offense that features Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez and Randy Arozarena and, Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez. It seems that Polanco has been the guy when they've needed the hit. He's stepped up and he's gotten the hit. So I do want to shout him out for that. Cal Raleigh played a fantastic series and he's continued that on against Toronto. And for Detroit, considering the drop, the absolute collapse they had in September, even though they do get eliminated, I got to think this playoff run was a success for Detroit and definitely encouraging for them to be able to come back from that drop off and defeat Cleveland on the road and then come into Seattle and almost take the series from the Mariners, who were one of the hottest teams in baseball over the last month and a half. So Detroit, it was an admirable effort and an admirable victory, but the Mariners just simply had it at the end, like right when they needed it most. And that leads to where we currently are. Now, this championship series, unfortunately, has already started because, the timing doesn't just line up with our show. Baseball does not work around our timing, despite our best efforts to get the MLB to do so. But we already have 2 games in the books for the Mariners and the Blue Jays championship series, one yesterday, one today. And so far, it has been all Mariners, basically. Aside from the very first pitch that Bryce Miller threw in the game yesterday, which was a George Springer solo home run, Seattle has dominated ever since that pitch, winning game 1 3-1, and then winning game 2 today 10-3. Once again, Jorge Polanco with key hits in both games yesterday with the go-ahead RBI single. Actually, I think he got both of runs 2 and 3 were RBI hits from Polanco, and then today had the go-ahead 3-run home run that really kicked off the Mariners offense and allowed them to take the lead. So, Ricky, let's give early impressions on this because we do have both games. And then what do you want to see, expect to see, think will happen the rest of the series?
Well, I think that the Mariners are going to win this series, and it props to Bryce Miller. He knew his assignment. He knew he had to go deep into game 1. And for a team like Seattle that played 15 innings 2 days prior, doesn't get a run in the first inning, gives up then a run on the first pitch in the bottom of the first inning to basically not allow a hit the rest of the game and to control that game, basically waiting until Gausman would come out. And I think that's the problem with Schneider is Kevin Gausman will have like a 4 or 5 pitch inning middle of the game, and then the first sign of trouble, he comes out. Like, yeah, he gave the home run to Cal Raleigh, but other than that, he was pretty solid. I don't see any reason to not extend him past, 77 pitches? Like, Kevin Gausman's a guy who's built for 90, 95 pitches. So to me, it's better than the middle relief in that Toronto bullpen because Dominguez has had his issues, Hoffman's had his issues, etc. But Seattle finds a way. And I was digging this up on Polanco because you mentioned the runners in scoring position. Overall this season with runners in scoring position, he's had a slash line of 337, 408, 577. If you extend that with 2 outs, That's 50 at-bats in the regular season with 2 outs, men in scoring position, a 400 hitter, 474 on base, 640 slug, 26 RBIs, and an OPS of 1.114. This guy is arguably the most clutch player in baseball. To turn around that pitch from Varland and get a 3-run homer and basically quiet the crowd, because Schneider has admitted he's going to walk Cal Raleigh any chance he did. He walked him in the first inning today. Julio Rodriguez hits a 3-run homer against Savage, who finally looked human. I think pitching down 1-0 in a series like Smoltz, like if they're pitching up 1-0, was a big difference. And then he walks Raleigh in the 5th. Your Savage comes out. You bring in Varland, who gets Julio, but then Polanco delivers the damage. That's the difference. Is the Mariners, when you pitch around their top guys, it's that bottom of the order. Those guys, like you saw Polanco, Josh Naylor hits a home run today and steals a base. Eugenio Suarez has almost hit a home run last night. He might be starting to find it. And then it's those role players, the Dominic Canzones, that just seem to find a way to get involved. And that Mariner bullpen, I thought, because Logan Gilbert, going with him on short rest is kind of a surprise to some extent. I know they don't have a lot of options, and Brian Wu at least is on the roster. But you look at the job the Mariner bullpen did in Game 2, when that game looked like Toronto was turned a 3-0 deficit into 3-3 early. The Mariners bullpen, which was a combination of Bizzardo, Vargas, and Hancock. This is even their top guys outside of Bizzardo. 6 innings, 1 hit. Yep. So basically, you save your top guys. You give them 2 days off outside of Bizzardo. That's a massive advantage. And now you got Kirby and Castillo, arguably your top 2 guys, against Shane Bieber, who's not the Shane Bieber that won the Cy Young with Cleveland, or was a candidate for the Cy Young with Cleveland, and Max Scherzer, who none of us know. We know Max Scherzer's pedigree. We don't know what Max Scherzer is at this point. So I would be shocked if this series gets back to Toronto. I think the Mariners right now, they're just playing with that magic. They're playing with that team chemistry. Dan Wilson has done an absolutely incredible job. We knew this team was talented. That's why they got rid of Scott Service. They needed a different voice. And for a lifelong Mariner, Dan Wilson was on that team in 01 to be 2 wins away from the franchise's first World Series appearance. It's a great story.
Absolutely. And you touched on a key point that I was looking at. The Mariners have obviously been doing well, but they've gotten great production from Cal Raleigh. He's having a fantastic postseason. Polanco, we've discussed. Rodriguez is doing well. And today, Naylor started to find it today, I noticed as well. If Eugenio Suarez can put it together, then I think you're right. I don't know if the series can get back to Toronto if he finds it along with all those rest of those guys. The Blue Jays, even entering the season, I was concerned about, how well this starting pitching would hold up for the long haul. And through the regular season, it held up pretty well. But I think, for aside from, that very first game against the Yankees, and then yesterday, Gausman's been good. Gausman's been really solid. He had, the really strong first game against the Yankees, and he was very good yesterday. But aside from that, I don't really know what to think of this Toronto pitching as a whole. You need at least a good pitching staff to win the World Series. I know there used to be the old adage that pitching wins championships. I don't know if that's entirely true anymore in this day and age, but I think you at least still need good quality pitching, and I just don't know. I think if you look at the 4 teams left, I think you could make a fair argument that the Blue Jays probably have the weakest pitching over the entirety of the pitching roster, although the Brewers, as we'll talk about in a bit here, their arms are starting to get a little bit worn out and a little bit used weirdly as well. But Mariners, the hot start, everything's flowing. I think, like you said, I thought it was also key as well today that they managed to cover 6 innings of relief with just 3 guys. And also note, that was Emerson Hancock's first postseason appearance this year, was in this game. So for that to be his first to come in on that stage and just shut it down, not only that, means his arm is probably fresh enough to where if you give him a day or two, he could probably go back out there and do it again, So I think they get the day off. They'll come in. A lot of their arms will be really fresh. They'll be behind, I think did you say it was Kirby game 3 is set to go. I think we were talking before, so they'll be behind Kirby in Game 3 and then probably Castillo in Game 4. So, there's a lot to be encouraged about with the Mariners, their pitching staff, and with Wu back in, just gives them another really good weapon to find that I just don't know if Toronto can match. I do want to give credit to a former Oriole who is near and dear to my heart, not Kevin Gausman, although him too, but Anthony Santander in his first ever championship series appearance, which is a sad fact for me to say, as he was with the Orioles for several years, and 2 of those included playoff appearances, did get a double in his first at-bat. So I do want to give a shout-out to Anthony Santander for showing up in his first at-bat in a championship series. That will do it for the first part of our show. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to jump over to the National League, where we're going to talk about this exact same setup and the NLCS preview, which will actually be a proper preview. By the way, before we go to break, though, I do want to give the live score update. I'm not entirely used to it anymore. We used to give the live score updates every week because there are always like a dozen games playing on Tuesday nights. But the Brewers and the Dodgers are live right now, and it is a whopping 0-0 in the top of the 6th. Blake Snell appears to be feeling as he has done so far in, I think he only has 1 playoff appearance so far, but he's did very well in that one. But we're going to keep our eye on that one, and we're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. You're listening to the Bullpen Bulletin here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go. For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the iSports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at iSports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making iSports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We are jumping into the National League now here in the second half of our show with, we'll say, the second most maybe straightforward series that we had this past week, the Dodgers and the Phillies. The Dodgers got off to an early lead in Philadelphia, taking both games 5-3 and then 4-3. So close matches there, but ultimately the Dodgers were able to hold on. Then Philadelphia came out, I guess, probably in desperation, game 3, and managed to take that one 8-2 before the Dodgers won it in probably the second most dramatic fashion maybe we had, with a 2-1 walk-off in the bottom of the 11th. So, Ricky, what are your thoughts on this series? I know it says that the Dodgers beat them 3-1. Seems pretty straightforward, but maybe not. What do you think?
I thought the Dodgers, for the most part, controlled this series, and for the most part, it was because the Phillies' bats just could not get going. Again, Kyle Schwarber did have a great game in Game 3 with a couple of home runs. The Phillies were able to get to Clayton Kershaw out of the bullpen and break that game open. But you're just waiting for the rest of those guys to get going. Like, where's Trey Turner? Where's Bryce Harper? Where's Alec Bohm? Like, where's these guys that have been a part of this group for the last couple of years that are needing to break out? And the Dodgers just continue to find ways and have different heroes. And I think that's what makes the Dodgers so impressive, is their depth is great. You saw Sasaki come out of the bullpen and be dominant. And I think what's the interesting thing is you feel bad for a guy like Orion Kierkering, because you never want to see a game end like that where he gets the ground ball he wants from Pajes. JT Realmuto is telling him to throw to first, and he even admits after the game he blocked out in that kind of moment. He fell to the pressure, throws home, throws it away. Probably doesn't even get the guy at home anyway, even if he makes the throw. And that's something Kierkering's gonna have to live with for a long time. I mean, it's basically his Mitch Williams moment. For those not familiar with the early 90s, Google it, Joe Carter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Dodgers just had the more complete team. And it's something where we'll talk about it when we get to the CS. They have so many different ways they can beat you. Their starting pitching was very good in this series. Glasnow, after pitching out of the bullpen in Game 1, was phenomenal. But I thought the series changed, Mike, in Game 4 in the 7th inning. The Phillies had the lead, had the momentum. I love the fact that Thompson brought in Duran to get the top of the order. But if Duran is in that spot, why are you walking Shohei Ohtani? And I get that Ohtani is really good, going to be the MVP, blah, 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 bases open, whatever. Ohtani is 2 for 19 in the series. Mookie Betts is a more complete hitter, arguably better all-around hitter than Ohtani, and was having a better series. And now I'm going to have my closer pitch with bases loaded to Mookie Betts, one of the better contact hitters in the league, who's hard to strike out. To me, if Duran is in the game, he's pitching to Ohtani. That's why I traded for him, to get outs there. That's just getting, and with 2 outs, that to me, that's being way too creative. Because you get out of that inning with Duran, you probably win Game 4 and get back to Philly for Game 5. To me, that's just overmanaging by Thompson, and I get it. And the Phillies made the decision, or it's reported today, that Rob Thompson will be back next year. They'll probably change the coaching staff, which means he's on the hot seat. And the Phillies could look really different. I mean, do they bring back Schwarber? JT Realmuto is a free agent. Ranger Suarez is a free agent. Zach Wheeler is going to be hurt coming into next year. I don't really know what the Phillies window is, and this seemed like the best opportunity to get to a World Series again, and they fall short. And the NL East, as we'll get to with a couple of these openings, is kind of crazy in itself, but this was a missed opportunity. Props to the Dodgers, but I think the Phillies are going to look back and wonder if they could just get somebody going. And you're familiar with this with DC. You wonder if Bryce Harper's ever going to get a championship, especially after his old franchise got one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the talk about the Phillies. Well, first, the series, man, I mean, just surprisingly close. I mean, you look at the games game by game, Philadelphia had that 3-0 lead through 5 in Game 1. They were off to a really good start. And then just the bullpen could not hold it together with Robertson and Strahm, unfortunately, falling apart there. And then Game 2, they almost had the crazy comeback, but then you do the bunt with the runner on second, and Castellanos gets thrown out, and boom, that seals that. Game 3 was obviously a walk away. And then, Game 4, you get 1 run. Like, we can talk all day about, the walk with the bases loaded to score the run or the Kerkering error, but there's no reason that this lineup with Trey Turner, with Bryce Harper, with Kyle Schwarber, with Baum, with Real Muto, their one run comes from Max Kepler driven in by Nick Castellanos. Like, that cannot happen in a game 4, ride or die situation. But credit to the Dodgers. The pitching was phenomenal. Yamamoto was great. Totani came in game 1 and did a really good job. Obviously, game 3 kind of gets away from them. But then game 4 was Glasnow. Glasnow comes in and does a phenomenal job. Who is it? It's Snell. Snell was game 2. Sorry, Snell does great. I think, and Sasaki. Sasaki was such a key to be able to figure out a way to unlock this kid, because he is a kid. He was 23, 24 years old, and for him to come in and give you 3 innings of just absolute shutdown baseball. My father, who's a lifelong Phillies fan, was even talking about that. He's like, man, that guy Sasaki, he came in and was just lights out. And that's so key for them moving forward, especially into the championship series. But yeah, the Phillies, I mean, oh boy, what an interesting situation moving forward. Like you said, all the stuff with the pitching staff, Suarez becoming a free agent, Wheeler hurt to start the year. Do they get Nola back to, what he once was, or does he continue his recent decline? Obviously, you've got Christopher Sanchez. I think he'll be fine, but, all the other, and Walker Buehler, believe he's a free agent. What do they try their arm shot with him and some of these other guys? Will they be able to get Andrew Painter up and have him finally lock down a spot in the rotation? And then you're stuck with Harper. You're stuck with Trey Turner. You're going to have to figure out how to work around that. And if that means maybe costing you Schwarber, that would be tough. I don't remember if Castellanos is still under contract. That would be tough. Real Muto. It's an interesting situation. It'll be curious to see how the front office and the management, works with this roster. Because, they kind of entered this year with mostly the same group. And it worked during the regular season. Clearly, they got the division and the second seed in the National League, but then the playoffs came and they crapped the bed. You'll look at some of these numbers. Looking at the final numbers in Game 4, Schwarber hit 188 in the series. Turner was 235. Harper was 200. Stott 150, like no good averages on this team. That they need to figure something out in the offseason, because if they come in with the same group, probably going to get the same result. Now moving on to another really good series that we had, the Brewers and the Cubs. I believe when we talked about this game a week ago, I think the game was actually going live, so we did not have a final at that time, but the Brewers had won game 1. They would win game 2 to take the 2-0 series lead. But then the Cubs, the scrappy Cubs, they fought their way back. They won game 3, 4-3. They won game 4, 6-0. And then game 5 came. It was a tough one, but Milwaukee ultimately pulled it out behind basically Jacob Mizorowski was basically your starter there, with the Brewers using their opener type formula, which I'm sure I imagine Ricky will talk about that. We were discussing that before the show. But Ricky, before we dive into that part, what were your thoughts on this series?
My thoughts are, Mike, I'm not sure if you agree. If Cade Horton's healthy, the Cubs win this series. Because I think you look at the Cubs, the fact that they're only good starter, and Matthew Boyd was great in game 4 after getting that rest from game 1. Having to pitch 3 days rest and was absolutely rocked by Milwaukee, bounced back extremely well. I think you look at the Cubs and getting to Priest early in game 3. Kyle Tucker hits the home run in game 4. You think all of a sudden he's going to get going. Ian Happ had a big home run at Wrigley. Suzuki is one of those guys that can get going. And I think the Cubs found themselves, they were just inconsistent offensively. I think you could have expected a lot more from the Cubs, at least from that side of things. When you look at, like what you mentioned, the Phillies numbers, if you look at the Cubs throughout the 5 games, they didn't exactly face many aces in this series. I mean, Michael Busch had a heck of a series, but Suzuki outside of the home run didn't do much. Happ hit 100, Pete Armstrong 185, Dansby Swanson 154. They needed a lot more from guys not named Busch, not named Suzuki. Tucker, I think, for 3 games kind of disappeared, then finally got on the scene. But the Brewers, all around, just with a better team. I loved it, and they did it with the long ball. All 3 home runs with homers. Contreras, Andrew Vaughn, which is probably the best midseason pickup of any team, got him off the scrap heap from the White Sox, and he's been a heck of a player. Bryce Terang goes deep. I think Pete Armstrong's got great hops, but I don't think he could get to that ball that's 600 feet ahead of him in center field. But the Brewers did what they did best. I mean, they got timely hits, only really had 1 starting pitcher in this series, and found a way to get it done. Pat Murphy has that team with a good chemistry that I think is just hard to find. But my overarching thought before we dive into Milwaukee a little bit later with the CS is I think if what you'll look back for the Cubs is if Cade Horton was healthy, I think the Cubs win this series.
I think that's an unfair thought, but when you look at the way the Cubs offense was, I mean, they scored 3 runs, 3, 3, 4, 6, and 1. Even with Horton pitching, does he change the outcome of any of those losses enough to make up for the offensive
Game 5
inconsistency
maybe,
of
because
the team?
you're starting him instead of Pomerantz.
Game 5 is a maybe. Game 5, I think, is your one that you look at and you go, well, maybe if they had Horton as in that one as opposed to Boyd, or maybe if they were able to pitch Horton Game 4, for example, and have Boyd for Game 5 on the more rest. Maybe that's kind of your game changer there. But it felt like a series where neither team was particularly perfect. They both kind of had their flaws. Nobody played, outstanding. Like Michael Busch had a great series. Nico Horner had a really good series as well. And his extends back. He had a really good postseason as well. Horner did. You look at Milwaukee, you look at the lineup, I think top to bottom, you see a little bit more balance. They got contributions from Churio, Terang, like you said, with the Game 5 home run. Contreras, Yelich did all right. Vaughn, kind of up and down, just a little bit more consistent. Yeah, I do find Milwaukee's approach to pitching rather interesting. And we'll talk, like you said, we'll talk about that for the NLCS. But the Cubs, look, you maybe could argue that they fell a little bit short of our expectations, but still a great season and very competitive against the Brewers. And 2 really tough series. Even if the Cubs had pulled out this series with the tough series against the Padres and then a tough series against the Brewers, what would even be left of the Cubs as they would face the Dodgers in this one? I think kind of like the Tigers, it was very admirable, very positive. Even in defeat, I think there was a lot of good to come away with. And, I think this team has a little bit of staying power as well. Of course, they have the big Kyle Tucker contract decision coming up. Are they going to be able to keep him? That's going to be a big contract. It's obviously not going to be like Ohtani or Soto levels, but that's going to be a beefy deal that some team is going to shell out for Tucker. That'll be probably one of the headlines of the offseason. So now we move to the NLCS. And by the way, I noted that if you count the Mariners color as kind of like a seafoam blue, like light sea blue type color, all 4 of these championship series teams have blue-based team colors. So there's your fun, random, useless fact of the evening. Now to baseball. Really intriguing series. I think, there are a couple of different combinations in the National League that would have been really fun for the championship series. I think this is one of them. By the way, quick score check. We do have a run on the board now. The Dodgers getting a run off a Freddie Freeman home run in the top of the 6th to make it 1-0. Now they're in the bottom of the 6th with Blake Snell still dealing, it looks like. So that game continues on. But Ricky, what are your thoughts? Preview this series. What are the big keys that we're looking at for both sides here?
So what's amazing with this series is you look at the head-to-head, Milwaukee swept the Dodgers in the regular season, which I think largely helped them to get this number 1 seed. And I think this comes down to, and Jeff Passan wrote a great article for ESPN that I totally agree with. This series is going to determine whether we have a labor strike or not in 27. Because if the Dodgers win and get to another World Series with the amount of stars they have, I think John Heyman also said this, it's the most talented team against the best team. Milwaukee, from a team-based chemistry perspective, is better. I think they have a more all-around group. The Dodgers have the stars. They have the regular season stars. They have the playoff stars. When you consider guys like Hernandez, the 2 Hernandezes, Tommy Edman, Freddie Freeman now is the guy that hits 6 in their order and hitting home runs like he did tonight. And I think if the Dodgers win, it's going to lead people to think, oh, now owners are going to think they have to spend to win, and they don't want to. That's going to lead to problems. If the Brewers win, the owners will go to the players union and say, hey, I don't have to spend on starting pitching because the Brewers only have like 2 starting pitchers and are winning games with openers and guys that if they only signed 1 free agent in the winter in Quintana, they're going to think that, hey, I don't got to spend. I can do what the Brewers are doing. And I don't think players want that either. So this is a really interesting dynamic between the two. I think the Dodgers are just better. I think when you could throw out Snell, Yamamoto, Ohtani, Glasnow, and know I can get at least 5 innings every night from those guys. I'm not asking for 6 or 7. I'm asking for 5. Snell's been great tonight. Yamamoto going tomorrow has been great. Ohtani, I think, could give him a little bit, but maybe that's the one you go to the bullpen more so you don't know how long he can go. And Glasnow, kind of the same thing. I don't know what the Brewers are going to do. And I think that's what bothers me is, okay, Quinn Priester had a really good year for the Brewers. He can't throw the first inning. And I know he could say first inning, game 3 against the Cubs, he was bad. But does that mean I have to throw Aaron Ashby an inning because I need Quinn Priester to pitch the second? Does that make that much of a difference? I guess they'll tell me yes. Jose Quintana is a guy that I would want starting in these games. Okay, Quintana didn't make a start in the NLDS. That's a guy who's been durable and a consistent 5-6 inning guy in the regular season. Jacob Mizorowski, does he get a start in this series? He should. That's a guy I want to see pitch. I want to see go 5 innings and start a game and get the momentum going and not come in the third, throw 103, and then the velocity dips because he's out of an inning. That, to me, is, I think, the real interesting way. It's the modern – Dodgers are analytical, but the Brewers are really analytical in the way they do things.
Right.
And Pat Murphy's like old school. It's kind of like the old school manager adapting to analytics. Dodgers is a little bit different. I don't know what other bullpen arms the Dodgers have. I think Milwaukee's got the better bullpen. But when you see the same guys over the course of a 7-game series 3 or 4 times, the Dodgers, I think, will eventually break through and get to them. I think it go 6, but overall, I like the Dodgers.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And it's interesting, as you were talking about it, we talked before the show. I used to kind of be of the mindset, like when you look at a playoff team and you look at the pitching, it's like, who are their 4? Who are their 4 guys that they're going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then obviously your number 1 comes back around for game 5, 2 for game 6, et cetera, yada, yada. And the Dodgers appear to be shaping up to kind of use that, I guess if you want to call it traditional at this point, because the new age deal doesn't necessarily follow that formula, kind of using that traditional setup because they have the guys. I think if Milwaukee was fully healthy with, obviously they have Peralta. Quintana had that injury right before the playoffs, so maybe that's kind of factoring in how they're using him. Only made 1 bulk relief appearance in the divisional round. Mizorowski, do you trust the young guy in the playoffs? And they're guys who they were using as 4 and 5 in the regular season, which was Priester and Chad Patrick. do you trust those guys to handle a start in a playoff game? I think that's kind of where they ended up in between. And then obviously Brandon Woodruff, who was their number 2, being out doesn't help the cause. I agree with you. I think the Dodgers, the way they won that series against the Phillies gives you a little bit more confidence than the way the Brewers beat the Cubs. And like you said, just these guys, and also, guys with long playoff success and experience. Mookie Betts, tons of playoff experience, been there a ton. Freddie Freeman, tons of playoff experience, been there a ton. 2 World Series for Freddie Freeman now. The Hernandezes, like you mentioned. Will Smith has been to his share. Shohei Ohtani now has some playoff experience. He didn't with the Angels. It's a shame Larry B isn't in the chat room for me to make that comment about the Angels there, but I digress. Yeah, I think the Dodgers are just more set up for success. I think this was a team that nobody really truly wanted to see get momentum entering the playoffs. I think you wanted them to be like a road team in that wild card round. You certainly didn't want them. Let's face it, they got like a warm-up match against the Reds. They were able to kind of find their way and get their momentum going without really having a true threat, which the Reds, I don't want to mean any disrespect to the Reds, but let's face it, of the 12 teams in the playoffs, they were number 12. And now they're on the roll. And like you said, the star power is finding its way. It's tough for me to see the Brewers with the way they played the Cubs, that translating to great success into the way the Dodgers are playing right now. So I'm with you. I think Dodgers, and I think it was kind of implied talking about the ALCS preview that I think we're both on the Mariners wagon at this point after those 2 games. But you know what? It's the Bullpen Bulletin. We're great at jinxing, so it might be Brewers Blue Jays in the World Series. Don't count that as law by any means. Now we're going to finish up our show tonight with a little fun game we're going to play. So as of right now, there are 8 manager openings in the MLB. There were 8 right after the season. Then the Rangers made their hire, so that brought it down to 7. But then just I believe it was yesterday or maybe this morning, the Padres manager retired. So that leaves the Padres opening now. So we're back up to 8, which is a little bit more than a quarter of the league. So we are going to go team by team here, and we are going to rate how attractive we think these positions are. And we're going to alternate back and forth just to make it fun, just to change things up a little bit. So I'll introduce the first team, and I think what a better team to begin this conversation than the team that just brought it back to 8, the Padres. Ricky, how attractive is that Padres opening, do you think? If you were to give it a rating 1 to 10.
So I'm actually, this is my favorite job out of the 8. So I'm going to give this an 8 because I think you look at the Padres, the way they're set up. And first off, props to Mike Schilt. I don't know what this is. And Ken Rosenthal kind of commented on during the game, like, okay, is it's health reasons or something or whatever it is. Sounds like Schilt also was different with the front office in some way as well. But this is still a great job because I think AJ Preller, regardless of the resources he has, is going to be aggressive at all times. So you're going to have a GM that wants to get money. You wants to make the team better at all costs. You also have a team filled with veterans. And if you look at the Padres, a couple of big hits here or there, and they're back in this position again. Let's remember the last 2 years, they took the World Series champs to a Game 5, and they also played well in that Cubs series outside of a couple swings here or there. I think there's an opportunity, especially in the West, outside of the Dodgers. You have at least a shot in the National League, continue to be better. If they can just get some power over the winter, I think they'll be more all-around team. You have a good bullpen that you're inheriting. I think this is a squad that you can, if a veteran manager came in, you can take this team where they want to go. So I'm going to give it an 8 because I think there's the best opportunity to be successful right away is in San Diego.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the more attractive opportunities. I'm going to give it a 6/7, and here's my asterisk with that. What makes it's a 7 for a manager who's going to be less like, and obviously this is more a front office deal, but he's going to not be developing young players as much because this is an organization that likes to, make trades, get veterans in there as opposed to bring up some of the younger guys. We saw it this past trade deadline. They traded a lot of really good young prospects, but of course they got really good young talent for turn. So I think for a manager that has the mindset of, we're going to, there's a lot of great players already in place. We're going to trade and be aggressive. The front office is going to be aggressive and support me. Then I think that's a better mindset than maybe a guy who likes working with the younger players and developing that a little bit more. My reason that I bring it down a little bit is because you're in a division with the Dodgers. I think that makes it a little bit more of a challenge because you have a division with a team that pretty much no matter how much your front office spends, they're probably going to spend more. And it's kind of a bigger name. You're kind of a little bit of little brother syndrome going on. So I think that makes it a little bit of a tougher. You're always going to have a team that is talented, that is going to be a difficult competition. You occasionally get some challenge from Arizona and San Francisco as well. So a tough division. You're going to need to be a manager who doesn't mind a little bit of a challenge in that regard. But it's a talented roster, great players. Do have to wonder about the Dylan Cease situation, how they handle him and maybe some of the other starting pitching in the offseason. That makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think of the 8, it's definitely at minimum probably top 3 of the 8 situations. So Ricky, now you hit me with a team and I'll give you my thoughts.
All right, so since we did the National League, let's go to the American League and let's talk about a team that at least we know kind of the semi-front runners for this position. Let's keep it in California. While one Los Angeles team is trying to win back-to-back World Series, the other Los Angeles team is trying to find yet another manager. So, Mike, what do you think about the Angels opening?
Man, it's not the worst of the group. I'll say that. Is it on the more attractive side? I mean, it's a division that is often competitive, but not necessarily impossible. You saw the Mariners won it with 90 games this year. You've got a front office that just can't seem to make the right moves. They're always trying. I'll give the Angels credit. The front office is always trying to get that roster right. They just can't ever seem to get it right. And again, you're just kind of going to an irrelevant spot, which is amazing. How little a team from a city like LA gets talked about. They're the equivalent of the Clippers in the NBA, really. I would give it a 5. I don't think it's terrible. I think you have some intriguing talent on this roster. I think you might, you have the Mike Trout situation that you have to manage. What do you get out of him? Where can you play him? Things like that. That makes it a little bit interesting. And you have, you're kind of always perpetually hiding in the shadow. But you're also walking into a situation where historically not a ton of success. So your expectations are relatively low. And you don't have any monsters in your division where you're like, oh, great, I have to deal with, so-and-so year in and year out. You've got a little bit more winnability there. So I'd give it a 5. I think it's like kind of right on average.
I'm going to give it a 4. And the reason is I think it's because I'm a guy looking at the Angel job. There's no stability there because Perry Minasian and the GM is definitely on the hot seat. I think if he goes, I probably go as the manager because they're eventually a clean house. And let's face it, Artie Moreno's done a bad job. Artie Moreno keeps chasing big contracts that don't pan out. And he hasn't given out a big contract in a long time, I think, because of that. But you don't know what the team looks like in terms of ownership. And we haven't really seen the Angels, like their farm system, like they've been trying to draft pitching. We haven't really seen any of it just yet. And we saw like Joe Adell break out this past year, and Nolan Chanel is an interesting player at first base. But okay, what's really there? Like, to me, it's like, okay, for the guys that are rumored, like, I get Pujols because he's worked with Trout. He's buddies with Trout. Torrey Hunter, the same thing. I think Torrey Hunter could be a pretty good manager for that group because Torrey Hunter played with the Angels and kind of knows the landscape, so to speak. But to me, in terms of if I'm trying to win, I don't really know because Seattle's going to be there. Houston's still going to be there. Texas is, I think, with Schumacher, and after a down year where they almost made the playoffs, where they were maybe 1 or 2 weeks away, they were in it till the final week of the year. You got to think the A's are eventually going to figure it out when they go to Vegas. So when you talk about being in LA and kind of being irrelevant in LA and trying to balance out the vets and develop the young kids, I don't really know how close the Angels are to winning. So to me, with the uneasiness in LA, I'm going to give it a 4.
That's fair. No, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. All right. Now moving on, I was looking down the list of jobs and I was like, you know what? Let's kick it back to the National League, but let's just get California off the list altogether here with the San Francisco Giants. What are your thoughts there?
I'm going to give this a 6. I think when you look at the Giants, the problem you have with taking this job in San Francisco is nobody wants to take your money. Willie Adames took their money, and now they have Rafael Devers, who, well, that's Boston's money, but they still have to pay him that contract, so at least that's there. For the Giants, you look at that spot, and I know Posey showed he could be aggressive his first year in the front office, which is great. I think you want that. But if I'm looking at this group, okay, is can I develop Bryce Eldridge into something? Can the Giants find pitching? Because let's face it, outside of the year they won 100 games where they lost game 5 to the Dodgers, and you brought up with the Padres that you got to deal with the Dodgers. Well, you got to deal with the Padres too if you're the Giants. So I like the aggressiveness Posey has, but there's the Giants have been banking on their past for a long time. And that's why one of their passes in the front office, because they've got to think maybe Posey can bring it back somehow. You do get Logan Webb, which is good. You do get Devers, which is good. But where's the future of the Giants, and can they develop offense in a pitcher-friendly ballpark? I don't know. I don't think it's bad, but I think it a lot depends on this. Do players want to come to San Francisco? And I still don't think we know that answer. And if it's not, then you got to develop. And they have some decent guys like I talked about, but I think it's a 6. You'll be able to compete for playoff spots, but how far can you really get in San Francisco?
Yeah, I was looking at this one, and I was also going to give this one a 5. Now, it's better than the Angels in the sense that I think there's more talent. But you brought up a couple of points that really make me feel it's number 5. Number 1, living in the shadow of your own past. I mean, this is a franchise that, you had the early 2000s runs with Barry Bonds where all eyes were on the Bay Area and San Francisco. And then you had all the championships in early 2010s with Buster Posey, who's now in the front office. And now you've fallen back a bit. You're at best 3rd in the division, basically year in and year out, because you're dealing with the Dodgers and the Padres. You're able to attract talent, but not to the same level as some of the other big dogs in the National League. So you're always kind of in an uphill battle in terms of competition. You have a front office that's willing to attack and go out and try to get guys, but are you going to be able to put all the pieces together? And oh, by the way, now you're trending down because you were a playoff team prior to the Devers trade, and then for some reason you get Devers and you slide right back to a 500 team and you end the season virtually irrelevant in the National League. It's weird because I give it the same score as the Angels. I do think it's a better situation, but there's a couple of tougher obstacles that you have to run through than I'm going to adjust the Angels down to a 4.5. That makes me feel a little bit better with giving San Francisco a 5.
So let's keep it in. Let's go back to the American League and let's go to a team that did not. Well, obviously, they were memorable at the trade deadline for all the wrong reasons. And the team with this thought we would sell, did not sell. The Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, this is a tough one because on the one hand, you are walking into a gutted roster that dealt so many of their guys at the trade deadline. On the other hand, you're walking into a gutted roster that ideally, if you work in hand with management, you can kind of help them craft it the way you want it. You've got that flexibility. I'm going to give it a 4. And the reason why I give it a 4 is because of the ownership situation. Ownership is looking to sell. They've got a lot of debt for some reason, which is amazing how all these, 100 millionaire, billionaire owners end up in this situation. But I digress. Generally, when teams are trading hands like that, in that fashion, things are real uneasy and real kind of like you're kind of almost walking on eggshells through the building. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to do, not enough. I think the bones of the organization are there to be okay. I think there were times this year where we thought that they were going to get competitive. Overall, the roster is just not in a fantastic spot right now. Yes, Byron Buxton did just hit 35 home runs. They have some good pitching. They have a really good farm system, so I'll give them that. But I think the uneasiness with the ownership and the roster that you're going to have to craft, which can be a good thing, but it's going to take time. I don't know if this is a situation that a lot, especially your established managers, not all of them are going to want to walk into a situation where they're going to want to kind of build the team from the ground up, especially when there are teams out there that have established rosters that you can walk in and start working with day one.
I'm going to give this a 3. And the only thing stopping me from making it a 1 or a 2 is the division at least is not, there's no favorite. Detroit's going to be good. Cleveland has at least won the last couple of years, but we know Cleveland, you never know with them. Kansas City was good in 24, about a game over this time around. White Sox are what they've been. So there's opportunity where you could go from like being a surprise. But I wonder, Mike, and is Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan going to be in this rotation next year? And if they're not, okay, you have Byron Buxton and you have a good decent farm system, but what do you really have? And I feel like this is a job that if someone takes this job, it's the guy that gets them to be somewhat competitive till they hire the next guy, and the next guy takes them through. I don't think you're going to get a Ron Gardenhire that is with this team from the ground floor to a consistent winner again. So because there's just not the roster stability from a short-term perspective is not there, are you going to get the opportunity to be patient in this day and age where teams are going from worst to first, where you look at a Marlin team with Clayton McCullough that was a laughingstock that turned into 78 wins.
Right.
Like, is that possible in Minnesota? I don't think so, just because I don't think the vets are there to really make that happen. There's no core of vets that I'm like, yeah, because they gutted it all. And I get why, but as a manager, I don't really know if I want to. I got to have a core of leadership in that clubhouse to keep, when we lose, to kind of keep the good vibes going. I don't think that's there. So to me, I give it a 3.
Hey, at least you always have the White Sox. You always have the White Sox to beat up on. All righty. So we kind of have this this AL NL alternation going on. So I'm going to keep going with that trend. I'm going to go with a really interesting one that I really like. I think you'll probably really like it too. The Atlanta Braves. What are your thoughts on those guys and that opening?
So I touched on this last week in the Around the Diamond. For those that did not listen last week, I wish they would hire Mark DeRosa. We'll see what the Braves try to do. But to me, I think this is a 7. I like this for a manager coming in, regardless of how much experience they have. You already have a core in place on offense. It's locked up for the next couple of years. You already have a pitching staff that is going to get healthier. You think Strider will come back? We'll see. Lopez, like they've got the piece. You have a Braves front office that at least Anthopoulos is going to make moves. I don't know that they're not usually the ones that spend a lot, but they'll go out and make a move or two that make them better. And I think the division, let's look at the NL East. We don't know what the Phillies are going to be after next year. We don't know what the Mets are going to be because with that instability with the Mets in terms of, okay, what do they do after the collapse? And the Marlins are what they are. The Nationals are what they are. So you have a path to being a playoff team year in and year out in Atlanta, a city that's dedicated to supporting its teams, and a team that just won a World Series a few years ago. Like this is a playoff experienced team that was just looking for the right voice in the clubhouse. So I think Brian Snitker left us in good hands for whoever gets this job. It's all about just not screwing it up. So to me, I think this is a 7 because I think any manager would want this Braves job.
Yeah, and that's why I would actually give it an 8. And it's mostly everything you said, but I'm going to weigh a little bit more points on that the division situation. You've got the Nationals who have regressed in their rebuild, typical. We'll get to talk about them here in a little bit. You've got the Marlins, a little bit of a surprise. Okay, you give them credit. The Mets, who knows, what Mets you're going to get on any given day. And the Phillies, what are the Phillies going to do? I think this division is primed for a team like the Braves who all get healthy finally and, get the guys back in position and you could make a run at it. And I think a guy could come in, year one and win this division. I don't think anybody would be particularly surprised if they made that happen. So yeah, definitely. This is my favorite of the group, just narrowly ahead of the Padres. But yeah, no, I think it's a really good situation that any manager would want.
So let's keep it going. I'll stay in the NL. I mean, let's just get the bad job out of the way. The Colorado Rockies.
Oof. I give it a 2.5. The only thing that's keeping me from giving it a 1 is you have absolutely zero expectation walking into that door. You have zero pressure walking into that situation to win. Look, you have to beat what did they finish 42 and 120. That you have to beat 42 and 120. That's your goal, walking in. You do have a couple of intriguing guys on this roster. Brenton Doyle. You've got Hunter Goodman, who just had a really good season. You have Chase Dollander. You wonder, hopefully he can start to put it together. I mean, you'll be happier if you accept a few fundamental truths. One, you're not going to have any pitching. The Rockies just can't develop pitching. 2, you have a management team that's not going to spend any money. They never do. 3, you're in a division where you're going to come in last place, guaranteed your first year, probably most of your first 5 years if you happen to get that far. Like I said, of all of the ones that I see on this list, this could be a 1. The only thing that keeps it a 1 is you have absolutely no expectation, and you have a couple of interesting names currently on the roster and in the farm system that could make some noise for you.
I'll give it a 2, and the only reason it's stopping me from a 1 is honestly stability. And what you're going, well, the Rockies stability, they won 42 games. Rockies looking for a new president also. So you're now coming in with a new president. You kind of can build things together, which I think if you're a manager and you're looking for that 3, 4, 5-year job security, you kind of saw that in Colorado. I mean, look at how long Bud Black lasted there. Bud Black didn't have any great success. Kind of had success for a little bit, but you're going to have a chance to build something. I don't know what that something is. You mentioned some of the core they have, but I can also mention that they haven't developed any pitching at all. And the division is brutal. The one thing stopping it from a 1, I don't even know who reading right now, I guess because they're looking for a GM. there's no really candidates, but I can't really think of an external candidate that really would look at this job and like, yeah, I want this. But there's a chance to at least have some continuity with whoever gets hired. So I'll give it a 2 just because of that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we've got, I think, if my math is correct, we have 2 teams left, and amazingly, we've managed to leave the 2 teams that I would be most interested in. So I guess we'll finish off the National League. We'll start it off with the Nationals, the Washington Nationals. Ricky, what are your thoughts on the team from DC?
Well, I think this is a 4.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do get to have Paul Taboni, who got hired from the Red Sox. So at least you first year GM, first year a manager you bring in, you kind of again build that continuity together, which gives you the job security, which helps. The problem with Washington for me is I don't know what this team is going to look like. Like we'll get into the other team in the Beltway, and you kind of know what you're going to have. You kind of know the core that's there. And Washington's got guys coming down the pipeline, but recent guys in the pipeline haven't exactly panned out. Okay, what is Robert Hassel? What is Dylan Cruz? You'll get to mentor those guys, but you're not going to mentor those guys from the standpoint of they're coming up and you can mold them. You kind of have to make it where you have to get their development accelerated. James Wood, Hassel, Dalen Lyle, we talked about last week, Kate Cavalli, insert top guys here. I mean, also Mackenzie Gore. Is Mackenzie Gore part of this franchise? I don't know past next year because Gore is going to be a guy the teams want to trade for. I think like the division helps them, but this is now a different front office group, and it's not the same Nationals that Mike Rizzo kind of built to a consistent contender outside of the last few years. So I think this job has potential. You could win here. We've seen people win here, but Davey Martinez, when he won there, had a veteran-laden roster. There's no veteran-laden roster here. And there's not that group. Again, we talk about the vets. Okay, what vets are in Washington that's going to get me to be like, I have a core now. I have the young guys kind of have to be the vets. And to me, that's still a little bit of a concern. Like, okay, is CJ Abrams grown enough where he's a vet? Or is the learners or the ownership going to spend money again to get me to be in a place where I can speed up the pipeline? I don't know. So because of that unknown, I'm going to give it a 4.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I'm going to give it a 4.5 because I think I gave the Twins a 4, and I think it's a better situation than Minnesota. But you just have so many inconsistencies. What is the front office going to do? In the past, they've spent money before. They haven't recently, so what are they going to do? Are they going to trade guys? You've got all of this great young talent, James Wood, CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, the pitcher, a couple of other good pitchers, Brad Lord, DJ Hers. It's also important what you don't have. Like you mentioned, you don't have veteran leadership. You have no bullpen. There is zero bullpen on this team. You don't have, a ton of consistent power. You don't have great plate discipline. You have so many issues. You have an ownership group that is inconsistent with how they approach the offseason. So you're in this weirdly awkward space in the rebuild where the rebuild has currently, if you were to grade the rebuild today on its success, you would grade it as a failure because, post Juan Soto trade, you've developed some of these guys and they've gotten there, but you've had no success. Your best season was 71 and 91. So I don't think people are going to be clamoring to walk into a situation where I kind of equate it to, for me, growing up, the Pirates were always in this situation where they would have a couple of guys get really, really good, but the team as a whole stunk. And then they would trade those guys away, and then they're back to ground zero. And then they have a few more guys, and they get really, really, really good. And then they trade those guys away because they still stink, and they'd go back to ground zero. And I fear that's kind of where the Nationals are positioned right now, is they have a couple of guys who've gotten really good, but the team as a whole stinks. So what do? Where's the actual timeline on this team? I don't think anybody really knows, and that's what makes it unattractive.
So last once we kept it in the Beltway, team with at least a GM, a team with recent new ownership, a team that drastically underachieved in 2024, the Baltimore Orioles.
Yep. I give it, it's not as good as it's better than most of these. I'll say that. Not as good as the Padres and Braves. To me, I give it a 6.5. And here's why. Here's my key point. What is this new ownership group actually doing? They came in day one with all these promises. Oh yeah, we're gonna open up the checkbook. Mike Elias is gonna be able to do what he wants, and very quickly it transcribed into, like there was this excitement. There was this like, oh yeah, we're going to go out, we're going to make moves, and then it became very canned responses very quickly. Oh, well, we'll review with ownership and we'll have a general approach to the offseason. David Rubenstein was in the stands every other home game in 2024, virtually non-existent second half of 2025. And you've regressed in this rebuild. Do the Orioles even know where they're truly at right now after this season? You have a couple guys injured most of the year. Where they stand, big question marks now with Adley Rutschman, who was kind of the face of this rebuild because he was the first number 1 overall pick. They have Basayo in town now. They just drafted 2 catchers. What's his future with the team? Jackson Holiday didn't progress. It progressed some in year 2, but not as much as the team would have hoped. Colton Cowser's kind of fallen off a little bit. Heston Kjerstad's disappeared off the face of the map. Jordan Westberg's injured every other week. Aside from Gunnar Henderson, there really isn't a guy on this roster, and Dylan Beavers, I would say. Those guys are probably the only guys that you're like, oh my God, that you can be excited about. And then the trade deadline. Completely gutted the bullpen. If you walk into this team, you're going to have to completely rebuild that bullpen. And oh, by the way, Felix Bautista, your all-star closer, suffered a shoulder injury this year, and now you might not have your closer next year. So it's not clear-cut, but let's also focus on the positives. Phenomenal young core, tons of talent there, lots to work with. The minor leagues, they've reloaded the system. That's looking really good and promising. And you did get an amazing resurgence from Trevor Rogers. Kyle Bradish came back healthy. So parts of your rotation are looking really solid for next year. So the health concerns eased a little bit towards the end of the season, but there's just a couple of things where I'm like, I'm not leaping for joy necessarily at the Orioles position.
I'm going to go with a 5. And I think you mentioned the ownership, but the ownership, like you said, the Rubensteins were like, all right, we're going to do what Mike Elias wants us to do. Does Mike Elias want the Orioles to spend? That's my question, because he came from an analytical environment in the Astros, and they kind of built everything through a core of players. Now, they did have supplements with a couple of signings, but not really a huge thing in Houston. So, okay, we all want the Orioles to spend the money. They spent it. Corbin Burns got hurt, and you don't have Corbin Burns next year. And I think that's where we mentioned how the division is a detriment to the Giant job and the Padre job. I think it's a real detriment to the Oriole job, because the Yankees are still the Yankees. The Red Sox are getting better. The Blue Jays are in the ALCS. The Rays are always a pain in everybody's butt every single year and somehow find a way to win 75, 80 games at the minimum. And they do it with really spending next to nothing. So, okay, where are the Orioles stacking up in all this? When it looked like going to last year, I think if we didn't pick the Yankees, we picked the Orioles to win this division. Okay, what is this core? What kind of manager is going to come in with this core? And if it's a veteran manager, they're not going to have the leash that Brandon Hyde had to build anything with this group. Brandon Hyde had a chance to go from the ground up and build it. If you're a young, inexperienced manager, are you going to get that same thing in that environment with that group that needs to win now, or make some really hard decisions? And if they make hard decisions, are you going to be around after those hard decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Ask Buck Showalter that. It doesn't end very well. I know it's different ownership, but to me, I like some of the players of the Orioles, but even though they made that run in 24, they didn't win. And when they made the run a couple years ago, they didn't beat Texas. They got destroyed by Texas. So can this young group, and we asked this about the Brewers, but they eventually broke through and made the CS. Can this young group break through and win a series in the playoffs?
Right.
I'm not entirely sure. I think there's good things. They'll always have a good farm system. They're always going to have good young players. But can you win in that division with a young group without spending big money? And that's why I think it's a 5. If the Rubensteins were going to spend on another big contract or two and say, we're going for this, I'd give it a 7 or 8. But until that ownership has the track record, you've got to drop them a bit down the totem pole.
Yep. And one of the problems the ownership had this past year is they spent a little bit of money, but they spent it on Charlie Morton and Gary Sanchez and Tomoyuki Sugano.
They shop at Sears when they should be shopping at Lord & Taylor.
Right, exactly. And I also don't know, realistically, how attractive is Baltimore to free agents? Not a big market, not a very nice city, if I were to be critical of it. You're smushed between two much larger city, much larger fan bases in well, maybe not much larger, but definitely you got the Phillies to the north, you got the Nationals to the south and west there. How attractive Baltimore's never, name like one major free agent contract they've signed in the last 50 years. All the talent's homegrown and developed. All of their major contracts are to homegrown talent. Chris Davis developed him, traded for him, and then developed him. Adam Jones traded for him and developed him. So who knows? But like I said, I think the young core does give it a little bit of a boost. But I don't think you're too far off in your assessment either, sir. And with that note, we are going to wrap up this episode. I think that last segment went way longer than either of us anticipated, but you know what? We like to babble, we like to ramble. So, it is what it is. If you're a fan of the show, you definitely know that by now. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. Shout out to our sponsors, Planet Jerky, premium brisket beef jerky that's on a whole nother planet. Go to planetjerky.net and get yours today. Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but promotes and donates to mental health research. So head on over to their site and shop their comfortable pairs. And if you are a fan of the show, you can follow us on X. You can follow Ricky at Rickinator555, talking a lot of different sports. He talks a lot of different sports on there. It's not just baseball, it's football, it's basketball, it's all of the above. You can follow yours truly at IESR_BMB. I'm mostly just complaining about the Ravens right now, and the Commanders, who I believe are currently losing to the Bears, if I saw my phone right. And then Alden, normally our third, he's not here tonight at DAZTRL. He's out there complaining about Arizona sports. Quick update. I almost forgot about a quick update. The Dodgers are still leading 1-0. Blake Snell has pitched 8 innings of one-hit baseball with 10 strikeouts. That's the power of an ace pitcher right there. I don't think you can really understate it. We will be back next week. Depending on timing, might be probably, I think, Tuesday we had discussed, because that's about when I think the ALCS will definitely be wrapped up by then based on the schedule. The National League Championship Series may or may not be wrapped up, so we're going to play it a little bit by ear to see. We want to try to get both wrapped up, because then we can do, we can do a World Series preview. Oh my gosh, it's almost here. It'll definitely be starting not this upcoming Friday, but next Friday. So we've got that to look forward to. Baseball season's almost wrapped up. We're almost done, guys. It's been crazy. It's been wild. We are going on. It'll be 8 months, I think, by the time we finally wrap this thing up that we've been doing this. So wonderful stuff, great things. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. This has been Ricky K and Mike Patt for the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Have a great week. Enjoy some wonderful Championship Series baseball, and we'll see you next time.